Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with John Layfield. John, what's going on, man? How are you?
Conrad, is the greatest day ever. It is St. Patty's Day, and I've got just a whole truckload full of trash cans. I'm going to go out and just start randomly hitting leprechauns everywhere I go. And if they're Irish, I'm just going to hit them. You know, St. Patty was wrong. He should have kept the snakes and got rid of the Irish.
I love that we're live here at somethingtowrestle.com. If you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Go hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications bell. You don't want to miss us the next time we're live. So, John, catch us up. You know, what all's going on with your backdrop and where you are, and what do you got planned for Mr. Briscoe next? I know you've got something up your sleeves.
Oh, yeah, I'm down here in God bless Texas, down here taking care of my mother, who's 88 years old. My father, who passed away years ago, his office, and as you can see up there, the cane there. See the cane there? That was the only possession my grandfather had when he passed away. He was a man that didn't have much money. Actually, didn't have much of anything, but he used that cane because he was blind, and he would run up and down the clotheslines. And he was a farmer, and he would check his plants with the cane on the clothesline. And so there's a big. I'm going to show you. Excuse me, getting up during this. It was a big. Didn't plan on showing this. There's a big notch in the cane.
Oh yeah, I see that. Yeah,
and that's where my grandfather, who was blind, would hook the clothesline, and he'd go down here and he'd fill the plants with his hands. And he was a farmer his whole life. And so when he passed away, my dad had two brothers, and my dad said, the only thing I want is this cane. So that's a pretty cool keepsake there of my grandfather. So I'm in my dad's office down here helping my mother out. She's got a lot of things that she needs, you know, as anybody has a place has to take care of. So I'm down here doing things for her and doing things for Mr. Briscoe.
Do you want to share one of the better ribs I've ever heard of with you and Mr. Briscoe in that South Texas community?
Yes, it's a wonderful community here. Mr. Briscoe wanted to retire here. So I went down to retirement home and I signed him up for that retirement home. He didn't tell me he wanted to retire at the retirement home, but I figured he wanted to be in Texas for a retirement. So I signed him up for the retirement home. And so they started sending him all kinds of stuff. And so they would call me and say, listen, who is this? I go, this is my uncle. I said, but he's a little bit feisty. They go, yeah, he's like yelling at us. He says he doesn't know anything about it. And I said, well, that's just because he didn't really want to move out of his house. I said, I'm paying for it. Don't worry about it. He wants to come there. He wants to be here. So for months, it took Mr. Briscoe to get out of going to a retirement home in Texas. He would never say anything to me about it. So one day he's in there and he goes, you know anything about stuff I'm getting in the mail? Because I'd signed him up for years of like Texas Parks and Wildlife, Texas Monthly. In fact, his brother Jack showed up one time and he had all these Texas magazines stacked up on his coffee table. And Jack was, the hell is that? He goes, that's Bradshaw. He sent all that shit to me every month. So finally, I'm telling Ron, I go, Ron, it's driving me nuts. I said, Briscoe I signed him up for a retirement home. And I said, but he won't sell it. Briscoe had gone just around the corner and he heard it. He goes, I knew it was you. I knew it was you. So it took him months to get out of a retirement home that I signed him up for. I had to pay some fees. I had to pay a lot. It was a very extensive rib. And they would call me and they go, you know, your uncle's mean. He's mean. He told me he don't want to come to Texas. He hates Texas and all. I said, no. That's just him. That's the defense mechanism. Stay on him.
I love this so much. Of course, our topic today is going to be Shawn Michaels, and we'll get there eventually. But I got to start with you were telling me something off air that you got to do this past weekend that we haven't talked about publicly before. What'd you do this past Thursday?
Oh, I had a great time. You know, South by Southwest was a great thing down in Austin, Texas. You know, Austin's a little bit different from the rest of Texas. A little bit hippier-ish, hippier-ish, if that's a word. It's always been a little bit different. And they have South by Southwest is a really cool thing. West Side Gun had this huge wrestling show, very similar to what Insane Clown Posse is doing with promoting wrestling, and they're kind of using their band as a way of a base to promote and get out to their audience. Terrific show. Nick Nemeth was there. Enzo was there. You had Justin Roberts from AEW, but you had a heck of a crew. The Hardy Boys were there, who's just as popular now, which is crazy as they were 30 years ago. They're an unbelievable team. Great show, a lot of fun. Went down there and worked for West Side Gun, and the guys got to meet them. It was a fun thing to do.
I think it's a huge opportunity. I really do. It's called Fourth Rope. I encourage anybody who is a hip hop fan and a pro wrestling fan to check it out. That's the number 4 thrope.com. Westside Gunman, just a huge wrestling fan. We've seen him front row at a lot of wrestling events, dripped out. And I love that he's throwing his hat in the promoter ring. I can't wait to see what's next. This could be a big idea, John.
It could be huge. I mean, these guys are massive, massive stars, and they're using that star power to promote wrestling, which is what they love doing besides their music. And they're doing a great job with it. I mean, they had a heck of a card. That card was absolutely loaded. It was fantastic. The crowd was a small arena venue. The place was absolutely packed into it. Music playing. These guys know how to make atmospheres. Insane Clown Posse is the same way. It's a cool vibe that they have. You've seen their show. These guys have a cool vibe, based upon what they do with their rap music. It's fantastic. I love what they're doing. Wrestling is so hot right now. I've never seen anything, including the Attitude Era, including the Hogan era, as hot as it is now.
I can't wait to see what's next for those guys, and I can't wait to see what's next for TNA. I don't know that everybody's talking about this, but man, they had a packed house, over 4,000 fans this weekend. The train keeps going. It feels like TNA's got a lot of momentum right now, John.
They are doing everything right. It's unbelievable. I mean, they're selling out arenas. It's one of those things. I was decent friend. I'm trying to drop a name, but decent friends with Mayor Bloomberg, and he would. One of the times we're sitting there, he had a big event in New York, and he goes, "Man, it sold out in an hour." I said, "Congratulations." He said, "Congratulations. We priced it wrong. You're selling it out in an hour." If you're selling something out in a day or two, you're either your venue's too small or your ticket prices are too low. So their venues are too small. That's a great thing to happen. They're selling out. Most places are going. They had 4,000 people down in El Paso. I mean, they are doing everything right. I hate to bring up something bad, but it's just opposite of kind of AEW. AEW had to go from big arenas down to smaller. They're going the opposite direction.
I can't wait to see what's next for TNA. It does feel like they're picking up a little bit of momentum, but in our rearview mirror, because as we're talking today is St. Patrick's Day, we'll talk about that in a minute. But yesterday was 316 Day, and little Jimmy Sorensen wants to know, the luck of JBL is great. Mr. JBL, does you have Stone Cold Steve Austin beer to celebrate 316 Day? Have you had the Broken Skull IPA? Where are you at on that?
Never once had it. I'm not an IPA drinker, but I would drink Steve's beer any day of the week. Just because it's Steve. Steve came by here one time. I'm in Athens, Texas. Steve came by here one time. He goes, "Hey, man, I'm coming through Athens." He said, "Stop by and see you." I said, "Okay, great." So he called me. He goes, "I'm in Tyler." I said, "You drove 40 miles past me." He goes, "Well, I'm too drunk to come back." So I said, "Okay, I'll come see you." So I called the little venue over there. I said, "Hey, I'm coming there with a wrestling buddy of mine." I said, "Can you make sure we have a private, area?" He goes, "I don't watch wrestling." He goes, "Who is it?" I said, "Steve Austin." He goes, "Okay." I get there, there's about 200 people standing outside waiting on Steve Austin for him to come by. So I would gladly drink the beer for Steve. I put out a little post yesterday on Austin 316 Day, and appreciation, basically saying thanks for my mortgage, thanks for my car, thanks for everything you did for me because you were our meal ticket.
I love that. That's so cool.
And by the way, I got to point this out that two things that I'm directly responsible for. One is the Attitude Era. It's me 100%, because if I had not lost to Jake Robertson, the King of the Ring, Jake would not have gone on to wrestle Steve, and Austin 316 would have never happened. So none of the Attitude Era would have happened except for me. I'm directly responsible. And then Shawn Michaels, if I had beat Shawn Michaels in that last pay-per-view, he would have had to work for me, and the match with The Undertaker would have never happened at WrestleMania 25. So I'm directly responsible for the greatest wrestling match of all time and the Attitude Era. You guys are all welcome, by the way. Every one of you, you're welcome.
I mean, I think they should, instead of putting you in the Hall of Fame again, they should just name the Hall of Fame after you.
I think they should, because I'm basically responsible for everything that's good in the world.
Yeah, wrestling god. I actually wanted to ask you about that, because I saw over the weekend where you were posting some fitness photos about you getting outside and moving around a little bit. And, with your phenomenal head of hair, that's not nearly as follically challenged in the rear as a friend of ours, maybe. I just couldn't help but comment, "You can't see me," because, boy, it sure did feel like you could be John Cena's older cousin, or.
That's right. I don't know if he's getting to look more like me. I don't know if he wants that look or not. I appreciate it. People say he looks like my son or younger brother or something, but He's a 16-time world champion, so I'll take it. No, I've always run. There's a hill right here. I coached here at the junior college, Athens Junior College here. Used to be old HBK, Trinity Valley Community College, Henderson County Junior College, but now it's Trinity Valley. And we used to, for conditioning, we'd make the players run the hills. And so when I was playing pro football, I would run those hills for conditioning. And then when I was living here and doing pay-per-views, I had a big pay-per-view, I'd run hills for conditioning. So I went out and ran the old hills again, just to kind of try to get back in shape and see what I can do.
I guess my question is, we know the GOAT is going to be at WrestleMania. We know the final boss is going to be at WrestleMania. But we saw The Rock hold up 3 fingers. Is John Cena's uncle going to be at WrestleMania? Is the wrestling god going to round out the tree? It does make sense. The GOAT, the final boss, and the wrestling god. Is that what we're to expect? Is that what's coming at WrestleMania? It
makes perfect sense to me. I don't think it makes perfect sense to anybody there. But so, yeah, it makes perfect sense. Obviously, I would love to. Absolutely 100% not in the cards. So no, I'm interested to see who it is, but it is definitely not me. I would love that, but not even. I don't think even being considered.
We got to answer some of the live questions because we got these last week and we're getting them again this week. Everyone wants to know your opinion. I don't even know if you saw it last weekend, so not 2 days ago, but 9 days ago. There was a big AEW pay-per-view called Revolution. And there was a big match that sort of had a year-long story that culminated, and they rolled the credits after and said it was the end. It was the Hollywood ending. And at this former Staples Center, the Crypto.com arena with Mariah May and Tony Storm. And the reason people want your opinion is because they bled buckets. It was reminiscent of your match with John Cena years ago at Judgment Day, or hell, the year before that with Eddie Guerrero. Have you seen the Tony Storm, Mariah May bloodbath match? I guess people want your opinion on a big bloody wrestling match, but on the ladies' side of things.
Yeah, I didn't see the match. I saw the social media clips, and I watched all of them. That's kind of how I keep up with things. I don't always watch matches, but I always keep up with the social media clips and see what's going on. When Eddie and I did it, we needed something big, and it was at the Staples Center also, which we set attendance record there a few months later. Actually, that was the tennis record. Set that off his mother's heart attack angle in El Paso. We needed something big, and we knew we needed something big. And as people say, Eddie bladed too deep. No, he didn't. He had what was called a business blade, and we always called it a business blade. It looked like a dagger. In fact, the next day I walked into Eddie. I'd taped up a knife that I found in catering, had a little white tape around it. I go, Eddie, I found your blade. It was like this dagger, this dagger. So we needed something like that, and I don't know if they did or not. I don't have an issue with it. It's shocking. It's gory, especially when it's women, because you're not used to that. And so people are talking about it. And, when they're talking about it, I'm not sure they're talking about it in a bad way, but they're talking about it. And I think that's great to get, AEW's had a hard time getting a lot of buzz recently. People have, kind of turned on them, because they were the darling for a while. And when you're the internet darling, it's a catch-22. Because just as being the internet darling is great, they can turn on you and you're the internet goat at that point, and they want to kick you around. And that's kind of what AEW has fallen into. So to me, I think it's created the buzz that they probably wanted. And I don't know. I'm the last person to say, but I don't feel like I had a problem with it. Did you?
Oh no, I enjoyed the story. I think it's one of the best stories in company history, and I just thought it was interesting that so many people wanted your feedback about that. Is that a compliment that when people get a lot of color, now they think, I wonder what JBL thinks about this?
We did it for a specific reason. We knew we were going to get a lot of color. It wasn't like, hey, we're just going to go out there and bleed a lot. We knew we were going to get a lot of color, and we did it on purpose. We needed something big at that point. A lot of guys were missing from SmackDown roster, and we needed something that we thought would ignite the buzz around the wrestling world, and it did. It worked. And so I was fine with that. And I think it's the same thing with Tony Storm. You look at that picture of her down, it's disgusting looking. That's what it's supposed to be. And so I think it worked.
I do want to ask you about the use of blood, because I'm wondering, do you think people would still hold your match with John Cena? Because I recently even saw an interview where, he was doing some charity work with a young fan, and that fan, who was maybe 8 years old, told John Cena that his favorite match of his was against you. And of course, that sort of shocked John, like, wow, I can't believe your parents let you see that sort of thing. But I wanted to ask, do you think those matches would be remembered as the classics that they are, your matches with Cena and Eddie, without the blood? Or is it the blood that made them a classic?
I don't think the blood made them a classic, because I'm egotistical enough to think that the work was pretty good. So I think we had a good match. I think the blood certainly helped. Anytime you have a tool like that, and it is a tool, it's a tool like the TV that I went through that calls the juice, or the table that I went through, or the window at the end. Those are all tools also. And so I don't know if you take out some of those tools, is the match as good? Probably not. But I thought the match itself was pretty good. Every champion, and I've said this many times, has to walk through hell if they want to transcend the genre. I knew Cena had to walk through hell. I knew that Cena was a very tough guy, and I knew Cena could work. And I know a lot of people are going to dispute me on that, but Cena could work. I mean, nobody can turn a crowd every single night like Cena did without being able to work. He was a great worker. But you have to walk through hell at some point. Triple H had to walk through hell with Cactus. Steve had to walk through hell with Brett. The Rock had to walk through hell. You have to walk through hell to let people know, whether you're a good guy or bad guy, that you're tough enough to carry that championship. Even if you're a chicken shit heel, they got to know that deep down you're tough enough, because sometimes the tough guy that is also a chicken shit makes you madder, because you're like Crockett used to say, he shouldn't have cheated. He could have done it on his own. Sometimes it actually benefits you. People knowing that you're tough when you're a chicken shit heel. But I thought Cena had to go through that at some point. I was glad that he went through it with me. It was honored that I was there, part of it. But I think the blood was just part of it. I don't think the blood was the one that either made it or wouldn't have made it by being or not being there.
So our topic today, John, is the one and only Shawn Michaels. And boy, this is one of our more polarizing figures in the history of wrestling, because you might get different answers depending on who you ask. So I want to start right at the beginning. When did you first meet Shawn, and what were your impressions meeting him, and what was the perception of Shawn before you met him and didn't line up? Because sometimes, like, I perceived that Tully Blanchard was going to be one of the biggest assholes I've ever met in wrestling. And then I met him, and today's Tully couldn't be a nicer guy. Just a 10 out of a 10 human being. But that was not my initial perception or expectation with him. What was yours of Shawn, and what did you think once you actually met him?
I didn't know about Shawn. I had not been in territories where Shawn had been. And, I was in Europe for 2 years before that, and Japan when I was off and wrestling in Texas, and I didn't read the dirt sheets. I'm just now starting to read some of the dirt sheets that you're sending to me. Now I realize that I'm the worst human being on the planet. My dog hates me, and I should die. Because your guys send them to me, and I realize now why I didn't read them. But I didn't have the perception of Shawn when I went there. I didn't have any preconceived notions about Shawn being anything. I knew what a great worker he was, but I didn't know a lot about WWE, and I didn't know a lot about the guys. I was in Europe. We didn't have the internet, and we didn't have dirt sheets, didn't have nothing. So when I came in, I just met Shawn, cold turkey, as I guess you'd say, for the very first time. And it was a wonderful, Shawn was an incredibly gracious guy back then. Back then he was a good guy. A lot of things people have started writing history about it. I think they're revising history. They want to talk about how bad the clique was and how bad stuff was in the dressing room. I was there. It was not. I didn't see that. And Shawn was not a bad guy. Shawn was, in fact, the opposite. Shawn was a great guy. He was incredibly gracious to me. He was incredibly nice to me. I was a new guy. Shawn didn't know whatsoever. And Shawn, as far as I know, and as far as to this day, I'll say was a terrific guy to know and to be around. He had some issues back then. We all had issues back then. There was nothing different from it. It was not particular to Shawn. We all had issues back then. And when you have something like that, things happen. But as far as the way he treated guys, Shawn had no issue with anybody except for Brett. He and Brett were in competition for the main slot. And they had, I think, probably a personal, I can't read their minds, a personal problem with each other. But they certainly had a professional problem with each other. A lot of history has come out now. Guys are saying, oh, Shawn killed my push. Shawn did this, Shawn did that. This is the same thing about Cena. This is the same thing about Hogan. They said the same thing about every guy on top. When guys fail, they look for excuses. And generally they'll point to the top guy, Shawn, Hulk, Cena, somebody, and go, oh, they killed my push. So they want to cover up for their failure. And instead of saying, hey, I just wasn't good enough and take that on their own, they want to blame somebody so they live easier in life. It's, kind of their way to cope.
That's really what I wanted to ask. I mean, some of this has to be out of professional jealousy. And I know that wrestling is a unique space in that, well, paranoia is sort of rampant in wrestling, and everybody thinks that someone is out to get them and somebody's going to bury me, and I'm paranoid about losing my spot or whatever it may be. Do you think that's because Shawn had a better than normal relationship with Vince? I mean, some guys never had a personal relationship with Vince. Shawn clearly did. Do you think it stemmed from that, or the fact that he was positioned near the top of the card? Was it financial jealousy? Did they want the belt, or is it just about the relationship with Vince, do you think?
No, I think it's about their spot. They wanted a better spot. And I think I've heard guys, do stuff on Shawn from back in the day, and all they do is just try to make excuses for their own failures, and they want to blame Shawn on it. And really, I really believe that's the whole case. The whole case. Did Shawn have a better relationship with Vince than everybody else? Yeah, so did Michael Jordan with Phil Jackson. So did Roger Staubach with Tom Landry. When you've got your best player on the team, the coach tends to like that player a little bit more than everybody else, or at least caters to him a little bit more. I remember Jimmy Johnson when he first came to the Dallas Cowboys, some backup running back, they're going to the playoffs for the first time after going 1-15. Some backup running back had fallen asleep in a team meeting. Jimmy Johnson woke him up and cut him on the spot during a team meeting. Right when they're going to the playoffs. This kid worked his whole life to get there. He fell asleep in 10 meeting. Jimmy Johnson cuts him. So a reporter asked him, said, what would you have done if that was Troy Aikman? And Jimmy Johnson, without missing a beat, said, woke him up. You treat guys differently. That's how you do things. That's life. And that's business. That's anywhere else. Shawn was treated different because same reason that Roger Staubach was treated different by Tom Landry.
Yeah, I love that story. I've told that a lot. Even in the sales world, production has its privileges, is what I
100%.
like to say. Hey, I want to ask you, because very early on, when you joined this merry band of misfits known as the World Wrestling Federation, you have a match on TV against Shawn. At the time, he's the world champ.
Yeah.
And here you are trying to sort of make your way in the business and earn a nice living for yourself. You've gone to Europe, you've gone to Mexico, man, you've been all over. And now you're back working for the WWF, sharing the ring with the WWF champion. And critically, this is a guy that Dave Meltzer at the time was saying is the best wrestler in the world. Sometimes we hear, guys say, oh, the first time I got in the ring with Flair, I got it. Did you feel like when you were in the ring, oh, this guy is at a different level? Did you know right away?
Yeah, I knew right away, but I was also a little bit nervous, and not because of it was the great Shawn Michaels. I had a match. My first big match that I really had was for NWA North American title with Kevin Von Erich, and it was not a good match because of me. I was in awe of Kevin. I was a fan of his, and I remember coming out of that match. Akbar, I think, was my manager, and I didn't feel good about it. I don't think it was as bad as probably what I thought it was, but I did not do my part. Kevin certainly did his part, and I remember after that, for weeks and months, I just felt bad about that. We had several matches after that I thought were pretty good, but I failed because I was in awe of the guy across from me. I'm glad that happened early in my career because I learned from it. I swore I'd never be in awe of a star again. No matter how great they are, I was going to do my part to be out there. And first match with Undertaker at Live Raw, that was the barometer. That's your test, Thankfully, Taker got me through it. But with Shawn there, if I hadn't had that match with Kevin, it might have been different, because I knew how good Shawn was. It was like, Conrad, I've said this many times, the greatest ensemble, and I'm digressing here, apologize, but the greatest ensemble of NBA talent ever was the Dream Team. There'll never be anything like that. And there's the famous story where Magic Johnson, tells the story. He was talking smack to Michael Jordan, and Jordan all of a sudden decides in a practice game. It's the game nobody ever saw on YouTube. It's a wonderful 3 or 4 minutes. They don't have the whole game, but they have the whole story. Jordan takes over the greatest ensemble of NBA talent and makes them look like junior high kids playing a varsity kid. That's how good Jordan was. And when he came back, he told Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, he said, the new sheriff in town. And Larry and Magic said, he's right. That's how good Jordan was. That's Shawn Michaels. We had one of the greatest ensembles of talent in the history of wrestling. We had Brett, Scott, and Kevin were still with us. We had most of the talent from the Attitude Era that would set all these records. Shawn was just better than everybody else. That's the only way to explain it. And I knew that going in. But I'd also been fortunate to had this match with Kevin, so I didn't feel like I was going to be overwhelmed. I was going to try to rise to the occasion. But right before the match, Briscoe pulls me aside. And they don't know me now. You know, I've worked in Japan, very stiff territory. I've worked in Europe, pretty stiff territory. Texas, same thing. I'm this big guy they don't know. I don't blame Jerry for pulling me aside. He said, I want you to know what you have in your hands. He said, this is the future of our company. This is our company. You've got to take care of him. You know, they were scared I might do something that, you know, would hurt him or something, you know, which they don't know. They don't know how green I am. They know I've been a lot of places. They don't know. They haven't seen a lot of my work. I don't blame them for doing that. So now all of a sudden I'm thinking, man, if something happens and Shawn gets hurt, my career's over. So when I went out there, I'm like thinking, oh my God, make sure put him bubble wrap around him. I don't want to make sure Shawn doesn't get hurt because I will get blamed now for this. And to Shawn's credit now, when he heard Jerry had said this, Shawn blew a gasket. It didn't come from Shawn. Shawn knew nothing about it. Shawn came up to me after the match. He goes, hey, man, I heard Jerry talk to you. And he may have said it before the match. I can't remember. I think it was before the match, a long time ago. And he goes, wrestle with me like you do anybody else. He goes, whatever you do, you do. Don't worry about hurting me. You know, Shawn was fantastic. Jerry, on the other hand, from Vince, they're wanting to take care of their main asset, which I don't blame him at all for pulling me aside and doing that. But that did not come from Shawn. But that did not help me going into this match with this all-time great of the fact that if he gets hurt, we're going to crucify you.
Let's fast forward a little bit to the Royal Rumble 1998. Of course, we're a couple of months removed from the Montreal Screwjob. It's going to be The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels for the world title in a casket match. Of course, the next day, we know Mike Tyson is going to have his confrontation with Stone Cold Steve Austin, and we're on a collision course for WrestleMania. But that bump that Shawn took over the top rope and he cracked his back on the edge of the casket there at Royal Rumble, did you guys know watching it or the day of the show that Shawn was messed up, or did we not find out until he can't get out of bed a few days later?
No, Shawn was a private guy. Shawn's not going to come back and bitch and complain. You know, Shawn's a tough guy too. You know, so he's had a million matches with really stiff people. You know, Shawn is not a guy that's going to complain. So we had no idea. We knew he took a bad bump, and of course, when you have your main guy had that happen to him, you get concerned because that's the guy that, you know, is going to carry your company into the future. But you never know, and you don't know on bumps. You know, sometimes when you see a bump, you can't tell if a guy's hurt or if a guy's injured, and there's a big difference. You know, when a guy's young in his career, they don't know the difference. When you get older, you kind of figure it out. But when you're watching it, you can't tell. So we didn't know if he was hurt or if he was injured, and we were hoping it was injured. You know, it turned out it wasn't, but it didn't look horrible. I mean, you've seen Shawn take a lot worse, but that's how injuries happen. That's why you don't know. You don't know what happened inside his body. And, you know, I think that's another problem that we had with wrestling, you know, so many days back then. You know, you never had a chance to recover. And so you have something like that. That might not have been an injury if that's the first match you'd had in a couple weeks. You know, but Shawn could have had 10 in the last 2 weeks. And because of that, it was catastrophic.
I want to ask you a little bit about, you know, the legend, I guess, of WrestleMania 14. We know that after Royal Rumble 98, Shawn's back is hurt. He's not going to be able to work very many matches. They even have to find a replacement for him that winds up being Savio Vega at the February pay-per-view, No Way Out. But somehow, some way, they got the match in the ring, which I think is an old Vince McMahonism. But Shawn was hurting for certain. But I guess there was speculation because Shawn was not only hurting physically, but emotionally, mentally, and maybe he had a monkey on his back at the time. And the legend is that if Shawn wouldn't have handled what was best for business, that the Undertaker was going to take matters into his own hands. We've all heard this story, that the Undertaker was wrapping his fists up. Do you remember any of that, or did that not become public until Undertaker started telling the story a few years ago?
Didn't become public. They're both private guys, and you know, whatever happened, I would assume, and I feel very confident that it would be handled behind closed doors. And I heard about it later, did not hear about it then. And, I was in the dressing room. All the guys went out together. I'd have heard about it if the guys knew about it. I don't think any of the guys knew about it. If they did, they didn't tell me. They didn't tell me or Wyndham or Ron or anybody else that was around. I guess Ron was there then. No, I didn't hear anything about it. I can tell you that's when Taker was talking to Viscera about hurting. I think he hurt Kevin. Taker was taping his wrist for that one because he would break his hand if he had to hit Viscera. There's some history to that as well. But no, I didn't hear any of that. I know Taker was always the break glass guy. In case something happened with anybody, he was that good that he could be put in any spot anywhere and things would be fine. But I don't have any knowledge of any of that happened. Just what I've heard since coming off, internet videos.
Of course, as the story goes, or the legend goes, I guess Triple H was supposed to wrestle Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 17 in Houston, Texas in 2001. I guess Shawn showed up to a show and maybe they decided, well, maybe he's not ready to come back just yet. We do know that he goes on to become a born-again Christian, totally turns his life around, and man, he came back and set the woods on fire at SummerSlam 2002. And it might be the best sort of second act in wrestling history. Do you remember another time where someone went away like this and then came back and performed at such a high level that Shawn did back then?
No, maybe Londos in the 30s.
Wow.
Londos went to Greece for a while and came back, and you had the problems with Gus Sonnenberg, and you had the problems with Dick Schicott and the guy that created the Irish Whip out of Boston. That was a replacement for by the Goldust Trio. No, I can't remember his name. Anyway, he came back and had to save wrestling.
Mahoney.
Mahoney, that's right, Mahoney. Very, very good. On St. Patty's Day, you got to be able to know that.
Got to dust that one off.
That's right. Strangler Lewis put him in there, same as he did with Wayne Munn back in the 20s, and that's when Munn got double crossed by Stanislaus Zbyszko and taking the title off of him. The biggest double cross, biggest screw job in history. And they did the same thing kind of with Gus Sonnenberg, and then he got exposed. And then they did the same thing with Mahoney, and Dick Schicott took the title off of him because he could. Mahoney wasn't a great shooter, and that almost killed the business, and Londos had to come back. And as JR would say, we'd all be doing barbecue right now if it hadn't been for Londos, which is true. I always thought that was one of the greatest second acts ever. And Shawn is right there with Londos for that second act. Absolutely amazing.
I know you said you always got along with Shawn and you felt like maybe the criticisms of Shawn in his first run were maybe sour grapes. Could you tell a difference in him personally once he returned?
Yeah, and first of all, I want to address some of the issues, and I don't want to address any of his personal issues. I just want to address the causes of them. Here's a guy, that boyhood dream comes true. That was legit. All Shawn wanted to be was a wrestler, and not a wrestler. He wanted to be the greatest wrestler of all time. He wanted to be the guy. He wanted to be the man, and it took forever. Vince did the same thing with The Rock, and he was correct in doing it, by the way. I've talked to a lot of guys about, don't want to get the title too early. Sometimes that could kill you. It can hurt you. And Vince was very good about that. Rock didn't quite understand why it took so long. Shawn didn't understand why it took so long. It was the right thing. When Shawn finally gets there, his whole working life, he's worked for this one moment. And all of a sudden he takes some crazy bump that doesn't look that bad and ends his career. That's heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking. Your whole life and career, you're a young person. Everything's good about you except for this one part on your back. Your dream's been taken from you. That had to be psychologically, that had to be every single way debilitating for somebody to have a dream that big, a dream that you've reached, and as soon as you reach it, it's taken from you. That had to be heartbreaking for Shawn. I've always just thought that, of all things. And by the way, that robbed us of some of the greatest matches of all time. Can you imagine Stone Cold versus HBK? And HBK was in his prime the whole time, because he was in his prime when he hurt his back. Can you imagine Stone Cold versus DX? The whole faction against him. That robbed the world of some of the greatest matches of all time, and robbed us of some of the greatest matches of all time. So I can certainly understand, Shawn being in absolute despair. I would have been too. when Sean came back, there's always an old adage in wrestling: don't find God. And people aren't saying that because they're atheists. It's because when you get in trouble, you get in trouble with your wife, you get in trouble with work, you find God. And funny how guys find God when they want to stay married and have screwed up, or they find God when they want to create a living and go preach somewhere and get paid for it. It's a pretty shitty thing to do. Sean's not 100% not like that. Sean is legit, absolutely changed. I thought Sean was great before. Sean has become a wonderful person. I mean, just a terrific guy. Any of the vices he had he took away because of his religion. So any problems he had on the downside was taken away. Sean was one of the few guys. I say not the few. I shouldn't say that because I can't read minds. Sean was one of the guys that came back that was legitimately changed in an incredible way. And I don't know anybody who would say any different.
So listen, when Sean comes back, he's pretty much exclusively on Monday Night Raw. You're a mainstay on SmackDown. So you're very rarely on the same show together. So I'm curious, how does your feud with Sean in late 2008, how does that even come to be if y'all are on different shows?
Well, it came to be because, I had to retire for a short while for my back, and I came back. And when I came back, that's when people say, are you glad you came back? Are you kidding me? I got to work with Jericho. I got to work with HBK. I got to work with Cena again. And I got to retire against Rey Mysterio. So, yeah, that's worth coming back for. So when I came back, it opened up things to be able to work. And so that was the whole thing was on Vince. When I came back, there was new ideas and new angles that I was not a part of before, and which was a huge appeal to come back. I mean, that was wonderful. I mean, it's, people say, would your career be the same without a world championship? No, absolutely. Of course not. But would it be the same without having to wrestle Shawn Michaels in a storyline in a major, a main event pay-per-view, or Chris Jericho in a main pay-per-view? No, absolutely not. It was wonderful. And so it came about just because when I came back, it kind of opened things up.
I do want to ask, is this, something that you pitched or Sean pitched, or is this a Vince idea, or do you think the idea came directly from creative?
I believe it was Vince. Now I could be wrong with that. It could be creative.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think it came from Sean because I remember Vince kind of explaining it to both of us. So if it came from Sean, Sean is a very, as you see with NXT, a very creative guy. And it could have come from Sean. He could have told Vince, and then Vince is, the way you do ideas with Vince was you would give him an idea, and then he'd spin it in his brain and regurgitate it to you in a different way. And it was usually a lot better. The JBL character kind of came out that way. But when he came back with it, it was Vince's idea, and not because he stole the idea, but because he made it his idea. And he would do that with any ideas. He used to tell me all the time, he goes, man, that Howard Finkel will send me some ideas. He goes, absolutely. He goes, they're crazy. But Vince would find little kernels in there, and he would turn the idea. So he'd always tell Howard, always send me ideas. And Howard always did. Vince loved getting ideas because a lot of times it wasn't the idea verbatim that happened, but Vince would take it and spin it around. So it could have come from Sean. It could have come from creative. I don't believe I think I'd remember it came from me. It was a long time ago, but I think I'd remember it did not come from me.
The feud actually starts at Cyber Sunday 2008. Batista is wrestling Chris Jericho, and they're voting for a special guest referee. 74% voted for Austin, 22% for Shawn Michaels, 4% for Randy Orton. At some point in the match, of course, now as a reminder, it's Batista and Chris Jericho for the world title. Stone Cold is your special guest referee. But Batista is going to be here and hit the spear. And I guess Shawn Michaels is sort of the backup referee. He's going to try to do the fast count, but you come out, pull Shawn out of the ring, and clothesline him to the floor. And it feels like the very next day, you're going to be out doing a promo and sort of explaining your actions from the pay-per-view. And you're saying that Jericho had offered you a deal where you'd get the next title shot, but that meant you had to help him make sure he kept the title. And he being you blame Shawn Michaels for screwing Jericho and keeping the title shot. And then, of course, you're talking about all the money that you would make as the champion. What do you think of the way to sort of introduce you into this angle that you had made a backdoor deal with Jericho? I like that.
I liked it a lot. It was well thought through. I got to work, with Sean and Vince. They had such a great relationship. Maybe the closest wrestler Vince relationship, except for maybe Undertaker was pretty close. Anyway, you're trying to choose between Vince's two favorite sons, I think. So, and Triple H, he loved Hunter. But when Sean was in their events, it was very collaborative. And, Sean was one of the few guys, as Undertaker said, that, man, he could be really blunt with Vince. He was, Sean would just flat tell him something. I'm like, oh my God, I wouldn't say that, because I was in there with him, and Sean would just say whatever's on his mind. And Vince loved it. Vince loved it. Vince hated yes men. The idea that Vince liked yes men, completely wrong. I'd see guys suck up to Vince, and we would laugh, go, he ain't gonna be here long. And he wouldn't. Vince didn't like suck ups. He liked guys who would stand up to him and give ideas. And Sean's a very smart guy, as you see with NXT. So there was a lot of collaboration between Vince and Sean going into this, which was very appreciative, because you've got a guy that can take care of the angle that you're wrestling.
I got to ask about, the way this is being put together. You're going to interfere that night backstage before Sean has his, or I guess before there's a rematch. You beat up Sean in the backstage area. Sean does a run in. You're going to get involved. You're going to keep this going, but never actually getting in the ring just yet for a few weeks. Are you trying to get in ring shape? Are you trying to get cleared? Or is it just old school promoting? Hey, let's not give them the match. Let's make them wait for it.
All of the above. So I think I was still doing commentary at the time. Is that right? I think I was. Yep. And, I'd go early, and as me and Michael Cole always did, and I would take my workout shorts, and I would do stairs, and I'd do ropes, in the ring, before the matches. I was doing everything I could to get in shape for matches. So yeah, it was all the above. I was getting in shape, but I was in decent shape at the time. I was just getting in better shape. Was really working hard on it. But a lot of it was also storyline driven.
You're also going to insert yourself into a last man standing match when they have a match between Shawn Michaels and Chris Jericho in Manchester, England. They go 18 minutes and 33 seconds, which is a big time Raw main event. But when you get involved, you wind up hitting Shawn with a big chair shot, and you have been synonymous with big chair shots on the giving end and the receiving end. What are the best practices for a memorable chair shot, John?
Hit them flat. That's all you got to do is hit them flat. It's going to hurt. And those old chairs, they hurt. People say, how do you do a chair shot? You close your eyes and hope you wake up. That's how you take it. You just get hit on the head. But the main thing is hit them flat. Don't hit them, a corner of the chair, make it the top of the chair, try to get their head right in the direct middle of the seat of the chair is how you do it. And you can whack them pretty hard as I did. I took it the same way I gave it, but guys are pretty good about that. But it's all about aim. If you catch them with the rail, you'll bust them wide open. Catch them with the top. That's what happened when Stevie hit me with the chair. He caught me at the top, by mistake. That's why I've got this massive scar up here. I always said if I go bald, I'm like a baseball. I've got so many stitches in my head. But that's the only thing that can really go wrong with a chair shot. Otherwise, it's just really hard and it hurts.
You're also going to find yourself in this Survivor Series match. There's Team HBK, which is Shawn Michaels, Rey Mysterio, Crime Time, and Great Khali, taking on Team JBL, which is JBL, The Miz, Morrison, MVP, and Kane. And at one point, you're going to send some live rounds Shawn Michaels' way. It's written in the Observer. One of them potatoed Michaels, who was busted open over the left eye. Tell me about this. Is that, listen, I hate to ask you to just sort of spoil the magic, but we've heard before at times old school guys would say, no, just get me right over the eye. We'll do it the hard way. And then other times, it's just not planned like that. It's just not ballet and shit happens. Which one was this?
It's not planned that way and shit happens. That wasn't Sean. Sean would do that, but he didn't. I would tell you if he did. He didn't tell me to bust him open. I don't remember exactly what happened, but it's just the shit happens thing. Potato. Sean's a tough guy. People don't Sean didn't get credit for that a lot, Yeah, but Sean was a tough. He didn't care. He didn't care about getting hit. He didn't care about nothing, and it's a little blood. Guys like, it's good for the business, as they used to always say. Guys never cared about getting busted open. They thought it was good. They thought it was fun, and actually they did. They actually thought it was fun. As crazy as that sounds, guys thought it was fun to get busted open and have a little juice coming out during a match. So Sean certainly didn't care. It was just added to aspect of the match.
Normally it feels like the Survivor Series match is almost like the blow off or the match after the blow off. I think back to like Hogan Andre, and of course, with the creation of the very first Survivor Series, they're on opposite teams. Maybe that was a continuation, but this feels a little different because before your feud is really going with Shawn, you find yourself captaining different Survivor Series teams. Did that feel, I guess, what did you think about that? Did you feel like that was out of order, getting the cart before the horse? Maybe we needed to have mano a mano a little longer, or was this a nice way to introduce it? And then secondly, what did you think about that old school elimination Survivor Series style match?
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the Survivor Series. I thought it was fun to be in. I thought it was fun to be a part of. And I thought I was glad to be different. I tell you what I think is a funny story of Shawn when he bailed me out one time with George Steele. George Steele was sitting there talking to me about a match, and George could overthink things. George was a very smart guy, but sometimes smart guys tend to turn simple math into trigonometry. And that's what George Steele could do sometimes with the wrestling match. He said, "Kid, why do we always have the heat and then the comeback? And, why do we always have it that way?" And he's trying to talk me into doing it different. And I'm like, "You got to be kidding me. You're not going to have me go out there and do a comeback first." And I'm sitting there just watching me. I'm in horror. It's like a rib. And George is like thinking out of his head now. He's turned this something around in his head. And thank God Shawn Michaels was sitting right there. He goes, "'Cause it works." And George is like, yeah, I guess you're right, kid. And walked off. I'm like, "Shawn, thank you so much. Thank you so much for saying something." Like, oh my God. So, the traditional Survivor Series, you're right, was kind of a blow off. It was done differently. This isn't like doing the comeback first in a match. This isn't turning simple math into calculus. This is just a different way of doing things. And I liked it.
Let's talk about how the promo sort of takes a turn after this. We see you on Monday Night Raw, and we're going to get the announcement that it's supposed to be JBL versus Shawn Michaels in a street fight. But then you're going to give a speech about what great financial shape you're in because your wife gave you a tip to buy gold and that you've made all this cash. And now, of course, you don't have to resort to being one of those 50 or 60-year-old guys who still does shows at high schools or, having fans take money with them for income. And of course, that feels like a veiled shot at the time for Hogan and Flair, who were doing stuff like that outside the tent.
Yep, it was not. It was not. I would not take a shot at old guys for doing that. Not certainly not Hogan and Flair. It was not. That was a coincidence. That it was just a shot at it was a shot at movies like The Wrestler. That
yes.
Guys going. It was a shot at things like that. It was not a specific shot at any two wrestlers, and I would not take a shot at Hogan and Flair like that ever.
Well, I didn't mean you
personally. Too much respect for him. I know. It was. I saw in some of the the dirt sheet you sent me that it was a shot at Hogan and Flair. Absolutely 100% not true. That had nothing to do with it. That was just a shot at old wrestlers. That's what they've always done, and you're going to end up, I may end up in a high school gym somewhere clotheslining somebody. Sometimes you do things because a friend asked you. Sometimes you do things because it's a good payoff. Sometimes you just do things because you're bored and you want to go do something, be part of the business. I have no issue whatsoever with that, and that was not a shot at Hogan and Flair.
Of course, Shawn Michaels is not engaging with you here. He leaves with his head down. Jerry Lawler is going to start calling him out. Fans are obviously disappointed. They wanted to see some physicality. And in the past on social media, you've quipped that you were kind of the good guy in this storyline, that maybe the fans just didn't understand it. I get you're trying to be a little tongue in cheek, but that's kind of the psychology behind this storyline wise, isn't it? That JBL, even though he's the bad guy, he believes he's the baby face, right?
100%. Yeah. There's never been a great heel that didn't think they were the baby face. Right. Every great heel thinks they're the baby face. You got to have a rationale for what you do. You don't, the idea of I'm doing something bad because I'm bad. That is so fire bad, water good. That's cartoons. That's cartoons. The guy shows up and tries to drop a rock on the Roadrunner or something. Why? Because he's a bad guy. It's stupid. It's cartoonish. You have to have depth and layers to this. And the heel has to believe deep down that they're a good guy. Now, it's twisted and demented in that heel's brain the way you get there, but you have to find a way to get there. You have to find a justification for what you're doing other than just, oh, I'm playing a bad guy. There's too many people playing bad guys, and those guys who are playing bad guys, those guys will never get over.
We got to mention one of the next steps, one of the next beats in this story.
Oh, and by the way, let me bring some up real quick. I think this is where I called Sean a name that Vince got mad at me during the promo. This is I hate to even say it because somebody's going to take it out of context, but it's obviously working in the promo. It's the one word Vince hated. It's the one that Maddox used and got fired from. And I just said it in the promo. I was just rambling and said it, and I thought it fit, and came back. Vince goes, I've got sponsors here. I didn't know that one word was the one word that Vince like you can curse, you can do all kinds of things. Don't say that one word.
Yeah, hypothetically, if you had to not necessarily donate blood, but if they were just going to check your blood like you were a diabetic, what might they do to your finger, John? Do you think
that is excellent. I wondered how you're going to get there. I wondered where you're going. I thought, how's he going to get there? Yeah. You've got to prick your finger. I didn't realize that's the one word Vince hated.
How is that possible that's the word Vince doesn't like?
That's the best question, Conrad. That's the best question of the week. How is that possible? That is the one word Vince hated. He's had people, he blew himself up on TV. He's done all these crazy things, and that's the one word he hates. That, like, how dare you use that word? That word, that's where you're drawing the line, but that's where Vince drew the line.
Man, there's got to be a story there somewhere, right?
There has to be something there.
Yes.
Because that one word to Vince is like, that crosses the line. Like, that does? Of all the things we do, that does?
By the way, shame on you, Blue Chew. This would have been an excellent segue today.
Yes, it would have been.
We'll move on. Hey, I do want to ask about the Slammy Award bit. That's sort of the next beat in the story. Of course, the Slammies are what they are. But Sean is going to accept Match of the Year for his match with Ric Flair. You're going to interrupt him and say that, hey, you should have won Match of the Year for your match with John Cena at Great American Bash. And Sean had been talking about wanting to put this trophy on his mantle, and then he's looking all sad as this happens. What do you now listen, I don't know, how much we want to get into all of this, but this is at a time when there's a lot of newsletter chatter about your off the field antics, and they're sort of all working now in front of the camera, and you start getting chants when you come out and things like that, where people are trying to talk about things they've read in a newsletter rather than staying on the topic at hand, which is your storyline with Sean. Was that something that you guys strategized creatively about, or did you just roll with the punches and who gives a shit? They paid their money, let them say what they want to say.
They paid their money, let them say what they say.
Yeah.
And it's the one thing of, it's kind of fun. It really is fun. It really is. I watched young people today. I say young people, I'm 58, so most of them are young to me. But I watch young people today, and I've talked to some of them about how not to let people hijack a show. And I've explained to them how to not let people hijack a show. Fans love to hijack a show. And it's fun when they try to hijack the show. Can you turn them? Can you turn them back to where you want them? Cena did that every single night. He was the best I've ever seen at it. I walked into One Night Stand when all they want to do is hijack the show, and I got them to turn on me, and just boo me. I did it several times in my career. It's fun to be able to do that. It's fun to be able to have fans wanting to go some complete different direction. Are you good enough to turn them? Can you say something that strikes a chord with them that turns them, which is what you have to do. You can't yell, "You suck." I watched some of these young guys today, girls, and they let people hijack shows, and it's tough to stop sometimes, but you got to have a plan going in, and to have a plan going in, a lot of times, just if you've been there a few times, you know what to do. But it's fun, Conrad. It really is. It's like playing a really good guy at chess when you're just kind of average. Can you hold up to the barrage, and can you find a way to turn the tide? It's fun to do.
Well, we're going to have some fun talking about this promo. Shawn Michaels is going to come out, and I guess he's sort of playing off the movie The Wrestler. You mentioned it earlier. As a reminder, the storyline is in '08 or at the tail end of '08, all in '09. And now, that movie came out in '08, so maybe you've seen it. Maybe fans are familiar with it, that sort of deal. But when Shawn comes out, he's going to cut a promo that Dave Meltzer says was the best thing on the show so far, where he's basically trying to address the fact that maybe fans weren't buying him being quote unquote broke. But he explained during his 20s, when he started making money, he was giving it away to his high school friends who were down on their luck. And in his 30s, he was helping out his family and the church and every charity he believed in. And he put his money in some investments, and now he's broke. And he has no choice because he doesn't want his brothers and sisters to lose their homes or his kids not to be able to go to college. And since JBL had been so good with his money, I'm going to go work for JBL. I don't want to be one of those wrestling tragedies who ends up bagging groceries or limping into high school gyms to wrestle. And there's not much fanfare or reaction for this promo. It is a good promo, but it just doesn't seem to connect with the crowd the way maybe we would expect. What do you remember being in the ring when this was happening? Sometimes when it's quiet like that, it means it's working. And other times you're wondering, are they buying it? Are you getting mixed messages, or were you feeling that, hey, we set the hook here?
I thought they bought it. And the reason I thought they bought it, I was obviously standing right there with him, was sometimes you leave a place perplexed, and when they do, it's unnerving, unless you've been there before. And I keep emphasizing that, Shawn and I, unfortunately, had been out there with a million different promos, and you could tell kind of when the crowd is going the direction you want them to. But if you're watching on television, or if you're watching and don't really know the business, you may just think, well, they're not into it. The crowd was sitting there going, they didn't want it to happen. They didn't want their beloved Heartbreak Kid, who they love so much. And a lot of these guys have been watching for 15, 20 years, grown up with him. They didn't want him to be in this position. They didn't want him to be the character that people felt sorry for. They didn't want him to be the character that, didn't have money to send his kids to school. The old guy that ended up broke. They didn't want this to happen. And I don't think they liked it. And that's when I say liked it, that's what you want. You want them pissed off, and I'm the one that's coming in to take advantage of this. And so Shawn's a great promo. I had a different take on it than what your dirt sheet writer said. I had a different take on gold prices too, by the way. Somebody made a big deal about gold prices that were down 2 months when I mentioned gold, when gold almost doubled during the financial crisis. So sometimes your dirt sheet writers are not correct. Isn't that crazy? That might be a fact. Hey, Conrad, one thing I want to bring up, and I don't know where you stand on this, because I would like to ask you as well. But people say, well, people don't believe that Shawn Michaels was bankrupt. Now, I can understand that, but I also can understand that people might not believe Sylvester Stallone was in jail for 25 years and had to move to Tulsa to start up a racketeering business.
Right.
I get that. Here's a guy that, we know where he was the last 25 years. So people are wanting it to be Hollywood, and then people are wanting it to not be Hollywood. People are wanting it to be a work, and then people are wanting it to be a shoot. So you can't make everybody happy with this. And I think sometimes you do something that you try to blur the lines as best you possible and suspend belief as best possible.
It's so amazing to me that this is even a topic. I'm totally on board with you. It's very believable that the Undertaker, an undead zombie man, can summon lightning in the building and float to the ceiling, and his brother, who burned alive, he can come out and just move his arms and flames shoot out all over the arena. We got no problem with any of that. But by God, if Shawn Michaels made a bad investment, well, that's just a bridge too far.
That's a bridge too far. We've buried guys alive and they come back. That shit happens that happens all the time. Guys don't go broke.
No, it's unbelievable. I appreciate you pointing that out.
Yeah, it's amazing how people choose when they want it to be a work and people choose when they don't. It's just, you can pick holes in anything.
we got to mention what's coming next here. We're gonna see. And by the way, you're slimming down in a major way. It's even written about in the newsletters that your goal weight was 230. Is that right?
I may have been, be below 240. I got below 240. Yeah, I had a goal with Eddie Guerrero to get down to 264 because I was a lot bigger back then. And for the match I had in Staples Center, I made 264 and a half the day of. Fairly, man, I lost about 20 pounds for that. And then I wanted to get down because I was just older and trying to keep my back healthy, trying to get down below 240, and I did for this match.
What was your heaviest in-ring weight, and what was your leanest?
328 was my biggest, and I was consistently around 290 my career. I was over 300 a lot of times. That was a little bit fat, and 280 was pretty good shape. 275 was probably my best, and then when I came along with Eddie, that was the best shape I'd ever been in by far, and that was like I say, that morning I weighed, before breakfast, so it's probably not a probably a 270 weight, but a 264 and a half, kind of like an amateur weigh-in. You weigh 5 pounds more when the match comes around, but probably about 270.
So you mentioned you were running hills behind your mom's place there. Do you have a goal weight right now?
I do. I'd like to get down to 250. I'm about 265.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying very hard. It's harder as you get older to lose the weight. That yeah, I'm actually watching my diet and all this different stuff, but 250 is probably the weight. I don't want to get too small because nothing worse than a real skinny old guy. A big old guy looks better. So I kind of have a lot of debate in my mind right now about where I want to be.
The match that we're going to see you on next, where they're saying that your goal was to hit 230, was JBL and Rey Mysterio. It goes to a DQ, and you win after 12 minutes and 28 seconds. And there's a moment here where Shawn Michaels comes down, and he's going to slap you. Fans are going to pop, and they're all thinking, oh, my God, Shawn has turned on JBL. Well, the ref, of course, immediately disqualifies Rey Mysterio because Shawn slapped you. And then you start smiling, and when they're playing it up, like you guys have developed a plot to screw Rey Mysterio and guarantee that JBL will advance and make the Final Four. I like this. I don't know why we don't see more of this crazy like a fox, I'm going to outsmart him heel. That's pretty good stuff.
It's great stuff. And the main reason you saw it is because of Shawn Michaels. I mean, yes. Shawn had, Shawn is such a smart guy. He's so fun to work with, but he had more control over a storyline than probably anybody but Undertaker in history. He'd go in and tell Vince what he wanted, and Vince a lot of times would just agree because he trusted Shawn so much. It was amazing to be in the meetings with Shawn and Vince. So the relationship they had, it was really cool. You could tell they love each other and had a lot of respect for each other. But a lot of that was just Shawn. Shawn was just good at everything he did. I've always said there were watching Shawn, especially in the 90s. And he was this way also. It's amazing when he came back, he was just as good. And some will say better, and I wouldn't dispute that. There were only 3 guys I ever saw that were like total like this. It was Shawn, Eddie Guerrero, and Kurt Angle. And those guys could walk out there and they were just different people. When Shawn walked out, it was like an electrical cord that wasn't grounded. The whole arena got electric. I mean, he exploded. The only way I can describe it, exploded out of that gorilla position. It was just amazing. I mean, you had incredible thinkers, like Taker is an incredible thinker, one of the greatest of all time, obviously. Cena is like that. Bret Hart is like that. But Shawn and Eddie and Kurt, those guys were just man, they just went out there and just did things. I don't know if they could tell you what they're going to do, but when they did it, it was just like, oh my God, that's magic. It was so cool to be out there with Shawn. And I got to wrestle all 3 of those guys. It was so cool to be out there with Shawn.
One of the biggest house shows of the year every year is always the Christmas time Madison Square Garden show. And so you're going to come out and do a promo here in front of all the fans around Christmas on Madison Square Garden. What a big show it is. Shawn Michaels and Kane are going to have a match, but you come out and do a promo first. You're going to rip on and bury all the New York sports franchises, little old school cheap heat. I love it. And you even point out that I know that I was advertised to be wrestling Shawn Michaels on this card, but now that Shawn is an employee of Layfield Inc., he is my Virgil. to my Ted DiBiase. He is my Ralphus to my Chris Jericho. The idea that you're comparing Shawn Michaels to Virgil and Ralphus, this is genius promo stuff that I love here in front of an MSG crowd.
It's the greatest ever. Of course, they knew that so well because they do the DiBiase Virgil storyline so well. It was just like, how preposterous is this to compare Shawn Michaels to Virgil? I thought I loved it. I really thought that was one of the greatest lines I've ever had. Was to say that because people want to come at stuff in their own minds and hate you for it. So you don't want to tell them, something simple like you suck. They'll boo you for that. That makes, that's not heat. That's the people can be monkeys. They'll do. You can teach them to do anything. They'll respond to you. Sing along. They'll say your phrase with you. That doesn't make you over. It's when they think about stuff and come back with it like, how dare you say that? That's when you get real heat. That's why I love that line so much.
Is that, when you think about that line, is that something that you remember coming up with, creative comes up with, Vince comes up with? We're getting comments here live, like Slushy Lesh, who wants to know, I'd love to know what goes on in their head, etc., when they improvise. Were you freestyling, or is that something?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'd freestyle. Now, I'd go out there with like several different ideas, but I'd always have like several different ways I can go and several different things. But I'd always look around to see, I'd done a million promos, so I had a lot of things in the bag. That's what I tell guys a lot. When you say you're doing stuff on the fly, you're doing stuff on the fly. But that doesn't mean that you haven't put a bunch of items, down in the bag. And you can pull them out. So I've got whatever, pick a number, 20 items in a bag that I can pull out, phrases, insults, different ways I can go. That's all preparation. When I go out there, I just want to feel it and go whatever direction I think the crowd needs to go. And so it's same with a match. I mean, you don't go out there with, we didn't go out there with no idea what we're going to do. We went out there with an idea, but we say you're calling on the fly. Yeah. But when you get out there, you realize that idea doesn't work. You've got another idea in the bag. You've got another idea behind that one. You got another idea behind that one. You've had thousands of matches. You also have an old match you can pull up. So you never go out there with just a complete blank slate and say, I'm just going to do whatever I feel. You go out there with a bag full of goodies and say, okay, I don't know what I'm going to pull out, but I'm going to pull out something that should work. And so that's how, to me, those things happen organically.
We know that Monday Night Raw is going to open with Rey Mysterio asking Shawn Michaels to come out, and he's going to challenge Shawn to a match on the show, with the winner going into the 4-way main event to get the title shot. Mysterio tells Michaels it's the right thing to do since Michaels cost him the shot, and Shawn agrees, but you come out and overrule them. So the main event winds up being a 4-way for the Rumble title shot against John Cena. It goes 24 minutes and 28 seconds. The crowd, according to Dave Meltzer, is shockingly dead for most of it. The problem
Funny, that always happened in my matches. Meltzer had it a while back. He had something. He goes, the crowd was really into it. The match was terrible. I had it between me and Cena. So there's always a way to. That's just. I've got to start clipping out the research reports you send me just to let people know that I'm the worst human being that ever lived, according to some of these internet reports.
Fans start chanting RKO at one point, and they're going bananas. And eventually, Shawn Michaels.
Wait a minute, they're going bananas. Oh, the match was the shits.
Well, I think he said they were dead for most of it. But the idea is, if we're going long, we need to get them hot at the end. But it is what
heaven forbid you take them on a roller coaster. That doesn't happen in the business.
Stand up, sit down. Stand up, sit down. Stand up, sit down. Either way, Shawn Michaels is going to tease like he's going to super kick you, but then he stops. And he's just going to be sort of reflective and standing there with sort of a sad look on his face. He's refusing to lay down. You're telling him and motioning for him to lay down. And the crowd's getting into it. Meltzer says maybe it went just a little too long. Finally, Michaels tells JBL to clothesline him. So JBL does and pins him. And as they're going off the air, McMahon is ordering Lawler to say that JBL is paying Michaels so much that it's worth more than possibly main eventing WrestleMania. What do you think of this storyline?
How does he know he's ordering Lawler to say that?
Well, that's a fair thing. I don't think McMahon ever ordered Lawler to scream about puppies. But storyline wise, it does feel like he might be getting notes.
It feels like it, but how does Meltzer know that?
Well, that's fair.
Okay. Vince may have done it, but I just don't know how anybody would know that. I mean, that was always a private communication between Vince and the commentator, so nobody else heard it.
It took a few months, but I think we finally got you on the FDM train.
I'm in Bruce's chair. I got to be on the FDW.
You gotta
FDM, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's really weird. We used to do live shows, and people would start chanting it, and I'm like, man, we're going a little too far here. Hey, so I want to ask you though. You're standing in the ring. I like the storyline of he works for you. He's your employee. You're telling him to get down. He won't do it. He tells you to clothesline him. You do. What'd you think of that execution standing in the ring? Did you think, hey man, we got him. We got gold. Or, I mean, what does it feel like to be there in that moment? Because it's a unique story. I mean, usually in wrestling, it's two guys, trying to they're both trying to win the match. So this psychology is totally different from what you would normally do. And respectfully, this veers a little more into acting and a little more towards the entertainment and a little less towards sports than we normally see. And I know that normally that happens in the confines of a promo or when we have these silly get-ups or skits, but here we are in the confines of a match. And this is, we're adjusting our sails a little bit. What do you think of this creatively?
I thought creatively it was good. And you can't, when you got episodic television, you can't judge things in a vacuum. And I think that's the mistake that people make, and maybe our friend Dave makes, but that's his job. That's what he's supposed to do. That's what people want him to write. But you can't judge things in a vacuum. You got to judge things episodically. So you might do something this week that people don't really like. And I say don't really like in a good way because you know where you're going next week. We're going the following week. You're never going to be 3 months from now or 2 months from now or 1 month from now. So you do things sometimes that are not designed to elicit a huge response. That's hot shotting, then that doesn't work. That doesn't last very long. So you don't want things to operate just in a vacuum of, hey, did this match get a huge reaction? Don't know. Did it get the reaction that you wanted it to get? Yes, because you know where you're going episodically going forward. That's a big difference when you're looking at matches, especially when you're looking back in history at a match, or you're looking at a match in a vacuum at the time saying, did this match, was it a huge spot at the end, or did it accomplish what you want? The thing you want is to accomplish what you want.
I do want to ask you about the next promo on Raw, because this is described by Dave Meltzer as being one of the absolute best opens for a Monday Night Raw ever, or in a long time, certainly. It was the first Monday Night Raw of 2009. It was described as being a very well-written show. It opens with Orton and Jericho coming out. They're doing a promo, sort of protesting the result of the main event with the four-way the prior week. They're explaining that everyone's out for themselves except Shawn Michaels and JBL were working in collusion. So out you guys come. Jericho lays into Shawn Michaels as being a hypocrite. And he said, the fans didn't believe me last year, but time has proven me to be correct. Really good stuff. Here comes Stephanie. And she announces that you are going to be getting a title shot at Randy Orton, or you're going to be getting a title shot, but Orton and Jericho are going to be in the Rumble. And they're demanding that Shawn Michaels not be in the Rumble. Stephanie says, no, I'll put him in. But you say, no, Shawn's not in the Rumble. He's going to be in my corner for my match with John Cena to ensure that I win the title. And of course, we find out that the main event for tonight's episode will be Cena and Shawn against Orton and Jericho. And then backstage, we see you basically break it down to Shawn saying, hey, here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn on John Cena and you're going to set him up so Orton can punt his head, and then he'll have to forfeit the title to me at the Royal Rumble. And if you can do that and keep me the champion through WrestleMania, I'll make sure you're financially set for life. I like the way you set this up, but Meltzer absolutely loves this opening segment, saying that they're all 4 stars and they can all talk. And of course, you got Stephanie right there. This 2009 era feels like almost a forgotten year in WWE history. Like, it's not celebrated, that 09, 10, 11, 12. That stuff's not celebrated nearly as much as it would have been a handful of years prior. But this is great stuff with a lot of big star power. Do you remember this promo?
I do remember, yeah, and we're going to find out right now about what kind of hypocritical prick I am. Because if I bash Meltzer, or not bash, I don't try not to bash him, but if I disagree with him when he says horrible stuff about me, I can't agree with him when he says good stuff about me. So, like, he's right here, he's wrong there. So I can't. I literally, I'm a hypocrite if I go in here and say, oh, he's right about this, but he's wrong about that. So I can't. It's. So we're going to find out how hypocritical I am here right now. What I loved about this was, and I did like it, so I'm agreeing with Dave Meltzer here. Even though obviously I agree with Dave Meltzer when he says good things about me, I disagree when he says bad things about me. It's very childish, but that's the way I am. I have no desire to change. So what I loved about this was Sean was people wanted to see that music playing, the Heartbreak Kid coming out dancing, doing all this stuff, flexing the arms, doing the little lunge over to the side. People wanted to see that. I had taken it from him, and Sean had taken it from him. I think that was a big part of this storyline was you wanted to see the Heartbreak Kid, and I had taken it from him, and Sean had taken it from him. And I think that was a big part. Crockett used to always tell me that, sometimes a heel just takes things that people want and doesn't let them have it. And that was what this was. That's why I thought this storyline was so good. Plus the fact I'm working with a guy that could do absolutely anything in Shawn Michaels. You set me up. You set me up on that. You set me up. You said, hey, Dave Meltzer thinks you're great in this. Do you agree with Dave Meltzer? You set me up on that. That was well played.
That's what I do.
Well played.
Let's talk about
Meltzer's 100% correct. What a great guy.
John Cena and Shawn Michaels are going to team up to take on Jericho and Orton. You're going to be watching backstage on a monitor. In the end, Orton is going to try an FU on Cena.
Hey, think about that tag match for a second. Those four guys.
Hall of Famers. John Cena and Shawn Michaels against Jericho and Randy Orton. Not on a pay-per-view, not at a SummerSlam, on a regular-ass Monday Night Raw. That's a pretty big-time main event, which has always been a real head-scratcher for why the business was sort of on a downswing at the time. Like, we've got so many stars loaded in here. I know the company's profitable and business is good, but it's not the boom that we experienced before or after. Do you buy into that whole the business is cyclical, or is that an excuse, do you think, from bookers?
No, it's cyclical, but it's also an excuse. It's an excuse for that you don't create talent. And the reason I believe it's cyclical, and I think I can back this up, is you have one Stone Cold, okay? So when Steve comes along, you put everything behind him. And Steve always believed this. I've heard Steve say this very much. When you get a guy really hot, now he wasn't talking about himself, he's talking about just in general, because Steve's Steve's pretty modest guy, from what you see, watch his cat videos and stuff. Steve's a really good dude. And happy Austin 316 day, by the way. But Steve used to always say, when a guy gets hot, you put the whole company behind him. And that's generally what you do. Tommy Wildfire Rich gets hot, you put the company behind him. Von Erichs get hot, you put company behind him. You have Shawn Michaels get hot, you put the company behind him. The problem happens is what happens when they leave, because they generally leave quick. You look at big stars, they generally don't just kind of fade off. Now, some do, but most you find a way, something happens. They go to Hollywood, they get injured, and then all of a sudden the business drops off, and you've had all this equity into one or two guys because they're so freaking hot. Because when the business gets hot, you want to put everything behind those guys because you're selling out every arena you put their name on. Now, understand there's usually a loaded card underneath them. I understand all that. But you usually have one or two super hot guys. But when those two guys, something happens to them, their career ends for some reason, business goes down significantly. It takes a while to build new stars. That's why I think business is cyclical. I've heard people say, just oversimplify it and say, business goes up every few years, goes down every few years. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. No, it doesn't. It goes up and goes down with stars. It's an attraction-oriented business. And when you have huge stars and you're able to get the business to a huge level, once those stars fade for whatever reason, and they all do, whether age or different opportunities or injuries, you have a downswing in the business. It's cyclical because of talent, is my opinion.
I do want to ask you about the finish here. Shawn is going to nail the super kick and get the pin, and we're seeing you on the monitor, and you don't necessarily seem upset that Shawn didn't follow your orders. Of course, that means that we're going to see Shawn Michaels and John Cena in a non-title match on Monday Night Raw. Cena's going to hit the STF, but you're at ringside. You push the rope towards Shawn so he can grab it for the break. And Shawn even seems unhappy that you're helping him here. Later, as Cena is going for the ropes, you're on the apron. Cena pauses, turns around into a super kick, and Shawn gets the clean pin. So we need to establish that Shawn can beat John Cena, but can he do it without the help of JBL? Next up is the contract signing for you and John Cena. The key, of course, is Cena telling Michaels that after wrestling him, he's more talented than anyone, and he's still Mr. WrestleMania, and he can't understand why anyone is working for JBL. And Michaels says that Cena doesn't understand where he's coming from because he's got to provide for his wife and send his kids to college. And I lost both my and her savings in the stock market crash. And Cena believes in the end, Michaels wouldn't cost him the title. Michaels said to Cena he was wrong. And Michaels goes to sucker punch Cena, but Cena's distracted. So you do the sucker punch. And when Michaels leaves the ring, you lariat him. Very good segment. People really like this. And listen, here you are thrown right back into the main event with two icons of WWE now. I mean, I know that, you're a wrestling god, but I'm saying you just think for a minute what Shawn Michaels meant to the company and what John Cena means to the company in that very moment. Of course, with the benefit of hindsight, we all know what a big star John was and became. But here we are sort of in the meat of his rise, January 2009. This is like the heart of the run. And there you are, shoulder to shoulder. This is a pretty cool moment for you, is it not?
Oh my God, absolutely. Absolutely. You look back at moments in life and you look, man, what am I doing in that ring? I wrestled Hogan one time in Philadelphia, and I remember thinking the same thing. It's just cool. Sometimes you're out there with guys, and they consider you a contemporary, whether you are or not, and then they treat you as such. And it's so cool to be out there with them. They're on kind of a playing field that's all level. We're all out there together. And it's really cool, though. You look back at it; those guys are massive, huge stars, icons of this wrestling industry, much bigger than me. And I got to go out there and play in the sandbox with them. And that was pretty cool.
Let's talk about the Royal Rumble. Here you are challenging for the world title, John Cena and JBL for the big belt. Of course, the storyline here is if you win the title, you're going to pay Shawn Michaels so much money he never has to work again. Eventually, we see you kick the referee, Mike Chioda. Shout out to Mike over at adfreeshows.com. And JBL and Cena are going to hit each other with simultaneous clotheslines. And when both go down, Shawn Michaels gets in. And he's going to start teasing that he's going to super kick Cena, but instead he super kicks JBL. Fans pop for that. Cena is smiling, and then Shawn super kicks Cena. And he's calling with the idea, who do I put on top here? I've knocked both fellas out with the sweet chin music. What do I do? Well, he puts you on top of John Cena. He goes and grabs referee Jack Doan, tells him to make the count. But Cena kicks out at 2. You go for the lariat. Cena ducks it, and he hits the patented move for the pin. I guess we're trying to move away from calling it the FU here. But I like this little bit where Shawn kind of finds himself being the monkey in the middle. When he super kicks you, everyone's excited, but they don't expect that second super kick. I love that little extra hump in the roller coaster there.
Oh, that's a Vince special. Loves doing stuff like that. That's directly from the boss himself. That's maybe Shawn thought of, maybe even Cena thought, but that's something Vince loved to do. The big, oh my goodness, he's finally a good guy. No, he didn't. No, he take it from him. Pull the rug out from under him. As Akbar used to say, we left them just like they like to be, miserable and mad. And that's how you leave them. I thought it was great. Which, by the way, I'd wrestled Shawn somewhere with Chioda as a referee, and I don't remember when it was. I thought it was in Europe. I can't remember. It could have been in Beijing or it could have been on the moon, or Poughkeepsie. Who knows? But I was wrestling Shawn, and I was calling a spot through the referee. And I just wanted to tell this story because I want to tell a little bit about how cool Shawn is. I was trying to call a spot through Chioda, and the crowd was pretty loud because it was Shawn in the ring with me, and I'd taken something into the corner, and I wanted to come out with a tackle, just to fly and tackle and knock Shawn out of the ring. So I said, "Tell him tackle," and Kyoto couldn't hear me. And I said, tackle, tell him tackle. And he couldn't hear me because of the crowd. I said, damn it, it's tackle. And so when I said it, finally Kyoto heard me, turned and told Sean to the tackle. Sean pulled me aside in the back and he said, hey, listen, man. He said, I will do anything you want. He goes, but don't cuss me. You know, and he wasn't commentating. He just like the matter. And I felt like I was 2 inches tall. I said, no, I said, I couldn't believe that Sean thought it was that him. I said, no, Sean, I was cussing, not even at the ref. I was just cussing because I couldn't get the spot called, but it was to Kyoto. I said, I would never do that with you. But I always thought it was cool that Sean, just real professionally pulled me aside and said, hey, just, he goes, don't cuss me. Cause he thought I'd yell. He thought I was cussing at him because he couldn't hear the spot. And, which I would never do. I wouldn't cuss at Kyoto either, by the way. I just was cussing and it happened to be yelling at Kyoto at the time.
I mean, I've heard guys, I know I shouldn't say this, but I've heard guys sort of lay out and call a match before the show. And I don't know how you do it without the F word. I've never heard it without it. I'm sure it can be done. I bet AJ Styles doesn't do it. But I heard a guy say, boom, 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 into the fucking deal, fuck him over the top.
It's unbelievable.
Slide back under the bottom, fuck deal. And it's like, wait, what happened? And they're both like, yep, got it. And I'm like, I don't even know. I didn't think you could use that. What just happened? But they both walked away like, all right, well, there's a spot. And then sure enough, later, boom, 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 fuck him over the top, fuck him in the deal, fucked him in the face. And I was like, that's exactly what it was. But how did they know? So I get that exists, but it is weird, isn't it?
It's incredibly weird. I used to sit there with Glenn Jacobs, Cade, and we'd just laugh at guys talking over matches because every other word was the F word. It's just something. Guys who didn't even curse would be seriously. Guys who did not curse would sit there going over a match with a fucking coming down the fucking hit. Just every other word's F word. And like, I don't know where the dynamic started, but it's very fun to listen to.
How long has it been like that? I first heard that in 2004 at a TNA show, and it was Raven and Dusty and somebody else in the back, and I was just like, this is how the sausage is made? Like,
I remember my first matches, my very first, and I would hear that, and then guys would just be cursing every other word when they talked over the match. Not when they're talking just to you, but when they talked over the match, every other word was a curse word. Yes. I remember when I first started, and people hearing that, like, what guys can't talk without saying this. And then I became one of those guys.
I love it. So listen, let's talk about the fallout from the double super kick. The next night on Monday Night Raw, of course, you're going to have a conversation with Sean like, hey, what the hell? Why'd you super kick me? And Sean actually has a plausible explanation. I had to do it. I had to kick you first to get Cena to put his guard down. And listen, maybe that doesn't make a ton of sense, but it makes a little sense that, hey, if we're trying to beat him, I know I have this one move that'll put him down, but if I just try it first and he's not ready for it, but if I kick you first, he's not ready for that. Makes total sense. They announced that it's going to be a rematch. And if JBL can win, he's going to get in the Elimination Chamber match. Of course, Cena wins the match in 13:08. Now there's going to be some arguing with JBL and Shawn Michaels. There's a miscommunication at the finish. Michaels goes to the top for an elbow. You're still arguing. Cena gets up, throws him into JBL, falls off the top. Cena then uses the there it is, which I guess is the new term for the FU at the time. And there's the finish. What do you think overall of this storyline of the John Cena, Shawn Michaels, JBL triage, if you will?
There was always something plausible to explain something. Obviously Sean super kicked one and super kicked me because he wanted to, but his plausible explanation was to get him to let his guard down. There was always something plausible for every bit of it, which I thought was a great creative way, sophisticated way of writing. So it wasn't just, hey, I did it. And with those two guys, those two guys are as creative as any two guys in the history of the business. It was a lot of fun working with those guys. You couldn't go wrong. You knew that nothing was going to get stuck. You knew nothing was going to go off the rails. And if it got off the rails, you had two of the guys who could bring it back on. It's so much fun to be out there with guys. It's like putting on a pair of old slippers. You feel comfortable. You know you're safe with those guys.
Of course, we're going to be moving on from John Cena. We're going to talk more about Shawn Michaels and and JBL. But first, I want to mention that we're going to see John Cena later this afternoon. I don't know that everybody is paying attention to this, but Cody Rhodes and John Cena are both going to be on Raw and Netflix. And I would say tonight, but that would be a lie because it's happening at 3 Eastern, 2 Central. And this is going to be a loaded show, but this will probably be the seminal moment in the John Cena turn. I mean, we've seen it happen. We know now that he's aligned himself with The Rock, and he's going to be standing across from Cody Rhodes for the world title at WrestleMania. But we haven't really heard the why. And I know that we've had a lot of fun talking about John Cena matches, but really the hallmark of John Cena, what helped make John Cena the superstar he is his ability to talk him into the business. And as much as the leg drop on Randy Savage was a big deal for the Hogan turn, it was actually the promo after the fact that cemented the heel turn and what people still think about to this day. When we see photos of the Hogan turn, it's Mean Gene holding the microphone and Hulk Hogan, preaching, for lack of a better word. We're going to see that tonight from John Cena. I think. How big of a night do you think this is in John Cena's career?
I'm so glad you used the term seminal moment because that's the exact phrase that I use. Not that gives justification to the phrase or to you, but that's the way I love to describe it because you've got to have a seminal moment for a big heel turn. And I'm talking about one that is between two guys that's going to carry pay-per-views. I'm not talking about your lower card guys who somebody got out of the way and hit by mistake and somebody turns heel or somebody doesn't. Who cares? You've got that's a level that is beneath something that you save it for moments like this. Every heel that has transcended the genre, which is what Cena has done. Cena's done it before he was a heel. Now he's a heel that has transcended the genre, has had to have a seminal moment, a reason to escalate. Now, whether that is an escalation, whether that is an explanation, whatever that is, you've got to have a seminal moment. And I agree with you. That moment is still to come. I think it probably happens today. And if not, it's going to happen soon. And I have a feeling it's going to be very good, but you've got to have that for a major heel to go with a major baby face. You've got to have that seminal moment. It's the most important thing you do in a storyline.
Well, let's talk about how you continue this storyline back then. And of course, we'll be talking about what happens with John Cena, I'm sure next week here on the program. Or you know what? If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications bell. If it's that damn crazy, hell, maybe we'll go live and react to it later today or tomorrow. We want you to be with us here when we do so. So go right now to somethingtowrestle.com, hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications bell. You never know when John and I are going to chime in and talk about what's happening on the road to WrestleMania. Here we are, though. We're setting up a match now between Shawn Michaels and JBL. And the stipulation is going to be such where if JBL wins, Shawn Michaels must work for JBL forever. In fact, he'll sign over his name and likeness to JBL. But if Shawn Michaels wins, well, he becomes a free agent and he collects on all that money that JBL would have owed him. And Meltzer would even say JBL has done a tremendous job on the promo setting this up, but it seems way too early to end the angle. Perhaps they want Undertaker versus Michaels, which has been talked about for Mania, so we have to end this program at No Way Out. JBL's been trying to push the idea that Michaels in his prime could beat him, but now he's broken down, and I don't think as a wrestler we really buy that JBL is in Michaels' league. So you're going to come out on Raw and do a job.
Right when Meltzer was saying good stuff about me, throws that in at the end.
He just can't help himself.
That's right. He's like the dog, that you think is house trained, and you're going, oh, look at my dog. He's so nice. Oh, he just shit on the couch.
We got to talk a little bit about the job evaluation here. JBL's out, and he's going to be doing the job evaluation of Shawn Michaels. He's basically blaming him for not helping him win the title and for losing last week to Cena, so he doesn't get in the chamber match. You're threatening to fire him, and then you offer him a deal, which is we'll have a match. And if I win, I'll pay your full salary for a year. You no longer have to work for me. Or I guess that's if Shawn wins. But if you win, there it is. All the IP. You're going to own it. We have a brief backstage encounter. We're trying to set up this match. And there's a bit of a promo. And we're even talking about how there's always going to be a place in the office for someone as beautiful and as talented as your wife. Man, when we step over that line, it starts to feel like ooh from a crowd standpoint, right?
Yeah, that's right. And that was as far as I wanted to go. Sean told me, and I don't think I'm betraying any trust with this. He said, "Hey man, please don't say anything negative about my wife. Call her names or things like that." He didn't want that, and I don't blame him. If my wife had been in the business, I wouldn't want that either. And so I never did. That was as far as I went, and that was cleared with Sean before I said that. He was fine. He was absolutely fine with that. That was a matter of respect. And so yeah, it was obviously the natural way to go, I thought. And so but it was done with Sean's permission, and obviously he okayed it. I just can't help but thinking that I would actually control NXT right now if I just won that damn match.
I love you for that. So the match actually happens, No Way Out 2009, and we know they go 13 minutes and 17 seconds. They're calling it an all or nothing match. Meltzer would say there was very little heat for a Shawn Michaels match here. It's on 4th on the card. And Meltzer would say that the crowd is dead, even when Shawn kicks out of a lariat. I don't know why, but it doesn't feel like the fans were as bought in on this storyline as maybe they could have been. You eventually confront Rebecca. She's going to punch you. Shawn comes back with a forearm, the nip up, the elbow off the top, and the super kick for the pin. We get a big pop post-match for Shawn Michaels kissing his wife, and they leave together. But this show in Seattle, like, it is a great story. I can see why this is a good story, but it feels like the crowd in Seattle, maybe they weren't as into the story. I mean, they're certainly into seeing Shawn and his wife celebrate, but what could we have done with the benefit of hindsight to give this a little more juice? Was Meltzer correct in that we cut it off too soon?
Yeah. If now you're making me flip flop on Meltzer. When he talks good about me, I have to agree with him, and because he's right. But I don't remember the crowd not being into it. Maybe they weren't. I don't know. Meltzer loves to say that the crowd wasn't into this or wasn't into that. I don't know. I thought the crowd enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed it. I loved being out there with Shawn Michaels. I thought it was one of the times of my life, one of the best 15 minutes or whatever it was of my life. I got beat up by Shawn and his entire family, which thank goodness Rebecca didn't hit me too hard. But I told her hit me however you want, and she caught me pretty good. But that's exactly what I wanted. I think always joke that Shawn and his whole family beat me up.
I think it's pretty cool that you had this moment before you retired and before he retired. I mean, you both have had incredible runs with the company. So to get to see you guys mix it up, hey, it's better than nothing. But I do agree with Meltzer's criticism that, this could have been a longer program. But I mean, I guess the speculation was true because we know what happened in 2009. They're setting up what's going to be one of the greatest WrestleMania matches of all time, if not the greatest, and Undertaker and Shawn. And had you not agreed to end the feud early, we wouldn't have gotten it. So thank you, Wrestling God, for making it happen.
You're right. You're welcome. I gave the wrestling world the greatest match of all time because I lost to Shawn. So I'm responsible for WrestleMania 25 and possibly the greatest wrestling match of all time. It's 100% because of me. And I always thought that was probably, in the cards, they wanted Shawn and Taker. And I'm glad they had it. I'm glad they had, as much as I'd love to have had Mr. WrestleMania at WrestleMania, I'm glad that I would rather have had Taker and Shawn because as a fan, that was one of the greatest matches of all time. When I sat there and watched it, I just retired against Rey Mysterio. And I knew it was over, and I was sad. I didn't even go to the after party. I just drove back here to Athens, Texas that night. I didn't want to retire. I love the business, and I wanted to stay in the business, and I was forced to retire because of health reasons and things like that, and mainly health reasons. And I didn't want to. I still love the business. I realize now that my career is over, and I've had this great run the last few months with Shawn Michaels, Randy Orton, John Cena, Rey Mysterio. I mean, and Chris Jericho, I couldn't have gone out any better. And I just remember kind of being heartbroken. Vince came back and hugged me, and I thought, God, man, I just want to go home. And I sat there, and Taker and Shawn were going into the ring, and I thought I'm going to watch part of the match, because I knew it'd be good. And I knew they had a little reason for it to be good. And when they had that match, I remember thinking, today's the right day to get out of the business. I just watched the greatest match of all time. And I just remember thinking, I can go home happy now. I waited for Taker and Sean to come back, shook their hand, and everybody's waiting for them. But I just remember thinking after seeing that, it's time to go home. And I'm glad that was what it was at WrestleMania because of what it did for history.
Well, there's going to be a little wrestling history made later this afternoon. Can't wait to see what happens next in the John Cena Cody Rhodes saga. But before we finish up our conversation on Shawn Michaels, you teased it last week. I felt like we needed to share it. You actually did a little television work with Shawn Michaels outside of the ring. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I had a great time. Shawn and I are pretty good friends. I guess we still are. I don't see Shawn a lot, but I wish I did. He came to Bermuda and went fishing with me. I sent all kinds of pictures to Stud Muffin. I think he has them. But we went with the Bean Brothers. There's Shawn out there. That's on Challenger Bank. There's Challenger, which is, I'm going to get them backwards. One's 3 miles out. One's 18 miles out. Champion and Argus banks out of off Bermuda. It's off of the easterly part of the island, 3 miles and 18 miles out. We were marlin fishing that day, fishing in the Marlin World Championship. And we didn't catch a ton of fish, so we had to catch some for Shawn's show. So we caught some tuna and some wahoo and stuff like that because the fishing wasn't that great that day. We got a local crew that I went there with all the time, the Bean Brothers, Alan and Delvin Bean. Alan and Delvin are in the middle. That's Delvin with the dreads. Alan is the captain there, and that's Mr. Keith Pierman, who just passed away a few years ago. Was one of my best mates, was my golfing buddy and my fishing buddy. And we went fishing all the time together, and we all went out, Shawn and there's me and Mr. Keith there, Keith Pierman. He was Bermuda's first black golf pro there at Mid-Ocean Club. Wonderful man, and he was my dear buddy. And Michael Cole came over. We went out on the boat and had 3 great days. There's Michael Cole. And and there's Ford there at the end. There was Shawn. We're going out to go fishing. And we didn't catch many marlin. We caught a few, but we caught a ton of fish and got it done for there's Shawn fishing off the boat. That's fishing. That's not for marlin. That would be for tuna because that's with the reel that he's holding in his hand. But I fished the Marlin World Championship every year. I actually led the marlin. There's our whole crew there that we fished with. Pretty good. That's best fishing crew in Bermuda. Wonderful guys. Shawn came over, spent 3 days with us. Everybody on the island fell in love with Shawn, as you would think they would. The boys all loved him. We got some stuff for his show. Talked about some of the kids program that I ran over there with the at-risk gang type kids that I ran a program over there for years with. And we had a lot of fun. In fact, Marlin World Championship, I got second in it one year, but there's not a second place. So I got to explain this. One fish, one day. So you fish, you have the Azores start the fishing. You have 8 hours fishing, fish in Bermuda, fish off Cabo, fish on the North Shore of Hawaii, fish also off the Barrier Reef. Everybody fishes for 8 hours. Well, we were leading the tournament for about 4 hours. There's $1 million prize, and we got clipped right at the very end by fish in Bermuda. So we finished second, but there's no second place. You don't get any money for second. There's just first. And so they got like $1 million for first. So I was almost a Marlin World Champion one year.
Man, it's like you just became you just went full Ricky Bobby. If you're not first, you're last.
If you're not, that's right. That's right. Literally got second and got 0 for it. So like for 4 or 5 hours, we led the tournament because there was no legal fish in the entire world. You have to have a fish over 500 pounds to be a legal marlin fish. But you don't keep them. You weigh them. And anyway, we had like a 600 something pound fish, which is not a huge marlin. A lot of times over 1,000 pounds wins. And so for like 4 or 5 hours, we're getting down to an hour left in the tournament. And we're thinking we're going to be the Marlin World Champions. And it was like $1 million prize, which, I'm going to share among 8 people, which that's great money, but being the Marlin World Champion, that's what I wanted. And right at the end, somebody clipped us in Bermuda and caught a fish that beat us. So they got first, but there's no second. There's literally no second. We finished with the second biggest fish, but there's not a second place prize, or they don't even list you if you're second. So we didn't even get listed. We went from winning the Marlin World Championship to not even getting listed.
What a rib.
Well, but Sean came over and we had a great time. Took him to Mid-Ocean Barbecue, the club there. And, everybody loved Shonda, as you would think. Everybody loved Michael Cole, as you would think also. We had a great time. Michael was there with us. Michael's been over there a couple times with me, going fishing and different stuff. He and Keith Pierman, the gentleman there that I told you was the first Bermuda golf black pro, Loved Michael. He'd always ask about Michael and Shawn Michaels and the guys. The guys just loved him.
Well, we love chatting with you every week here, and we apologize that we were a little late dropping, but we did it live, and you never know when we're going live again. So if you haven't already, one last time, I want to tell you, go hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications bell. It's somethingtowrestle.com, and get ready, boys and girls. We get a pregame for our St. Patty's Day celebration with John Cena and Cody in the same place at the same time for the first time since the Elimination Chamber. What do you expect today, John?
I expect a seminal moment. You know, it's hard to say I expect something unexpected, but I expect something unexpected. You know, Cena is so good. And I watched him. You know, I got to call most of his matches because I retired, went straight into commentary, and he was the guy on top. So I got to call his matches. I would see him walk into arenas where the whole arena is chanting, you know, half of it's chanting, "Let's go, Cena, Cena sucks." He would turn the entire crowd. We talk about not hijacking the show or not letting people hijack. Cena was the best I've ever seen at it, and he's the best at big moments. You know, I named him Big Match John for a reason. After Big Shot Rob Ori, because I loved Rob Ori, and the guy was unbelievable. I think Cena's going to cut it loose today, and I think something's going to happen. You know, it's hard to say something big's going to happen unexpected, but I feel like something big's going to happen that's unexpected. I hope it does. I'm a fan. I'm a fan. I want to see it. I don't want to know nothing. If I got to talk to Bruce wouldn't tell me anyway. I wouldn't ask, but I don't want to know. I want to watch it live and be surprised with everybody.
We're all going to be surprised, and we're going to be talking about it right here at somethingtowrestle.com. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next week right here on Something to Wrestle with John Layfield.